So as she shared in my intro a little bit, I'm a mom to 7 kids, which is by far my most important role, living out my physical maternity with my children. But I think it's important for us to recognize that in order for women to be whole and authentic and to feel true purpose and meaning and joy in our life, that we have to acknowledge that we have a mind, a body, and a spirit, and that they're all uniquely female and they're uniquely feminine. And so for us as women, to live whole, integrated lives, we have to recognize that our physical bodies have a very strong impact on our mind and our spirit. And so as a board-certified lactation consultant and a women's health specialist, I focus a lot on the interplay, that delicate, really special, uniquely feminine interplay of hormones and how they affect us throughout our cycle and what makes us just uniquely woman. And it's so important for us to insist that our women's health care also accept the norm of a female body as it was created by God. And so that, I think, is what you're asking potentially there.
Absolutely. And you can tell us a little bit about your introduction as well and go further into that. But I know that there was a lot about that in your bio. And so that was definitely something that I was very curious about. And I think probably the rest of us as well, because you talk so much about healthcare and how it can empower us as opposed to what we see healthcare as today. Yep. And then, of course, as a mom of 7 children yourself, I'm sure that you've seen healthcare in different ages of their lives, and then how maybe your idea from a Catholic perspective clashes with society's idea of that as well. So I'm interested in more about how you became involved in Guiding Star and,
absolutely.
and holistic feminism.
Well, this is actually just such a joy for me to be here today with you to talk about reframing women's healthcare, because I truly believe that if we're going to start to build upon these ideas that Gloria had shared with us a little bit this morning about insisting that we experience the world as females, that we relate to the world in a way that's different than men, the place that's going to start is by having healthcare acknowledge that our bodies are uniquely different and created beautifully, and that there's nothing about our bodies that's a mistake, because we believe that we are the product of a loving creator who knit us together with great intention and great purpose. And so our fertility, our childbearing, and our breastfeeding, those are unique functions to a female. And so I talk a lot about, my work with Guiding Star, about ovulation, gestation, and lactation. And I call them the female superpowers because they really are quite amazing things that can never be replicated or artificially created outside of a woman's body. We have that delicate interplay of hormones that allows us to receive new life, nurture and grow new life, and then continue to nourish and sustain life with just our body. And that is a superpower. That is amazing, and our healthcare system needs to recognize that as the norm and the ideal for all women's healthcare. But I didn't always know this. I think I did know it instinctively, as I think every little girl instinctively knows that there's something really beautiful and special about her body. But as we grow older, our culture kind of takes that from us. It takes that self-assurance from us. And many of us, it happens, right around 13, 14, 15 years old as we start to go to the doctor for the first times, as we start learning the first messages about our fertility, as we sit through the class in 4th grade, welcome to adolescence or whatever it's called these days. And there is a very subtle undertone of that your body is going to get in the way of your career. Your body is going to get in the way of your success. Your body is going to be a problem. And the responsible, safe, good thing to do is to get on top of that and alter and suppress and destroy your female body, because that's what's going to bring you purpose and joy and meaning in this world. And unfortunately, many young women fall for that. And I think I maybe had kind of subconsciously fallen for that, because I actually identify with you. I did not think I would have children. I didn't really care if I had children. I wasn't going to actively try to avoid children, but I just really didn't think of it as part of my life. So when I went off to college, and the very first day of my freshman year, I met a dashing young man. All my plans kind of went out the window, which, praise God, I had a faithfulness. I had been raised in the church, because I understood the church's teachings on contraception. I understood that was not something that was compatible with a Catholic marriage. And so praise be to God that we did not contracept, that we did not try to actively avoid children, and that my husband also respected the church's teachings on fertility. And we were blessed in the way that God blesses some families. And by respecting my natural body, my fertility is very good, evidently, with my husband as well. In the first 5 years of our marriage, we welcomed 4 children, which was a beautiful, unique challenge because at the time, I also was serving as a campus minister. I didn't know you were a campus minister, so that's fun. We were the campus ministers at the University of Minnesota, Duluth. And so the Newman House at UMD is now occupied by a very famous occupant. Many of you probably know his podcast. Father Mike actually lives in my old house. And so we spent the first 3 years of our marriage in that Newman House welcoming children. And as we began having children and as I began breastfeeding and changing babies on a college campus, as I was accepting and living out my maternity physically with my female body intact, conversations with female students got really interesting. There were a lot of questions about, oh gosh, are you worried that you're not going to be able to, do this thing, go this place, travel this thing, go back to school? There were very limiting thoughts that were very pervasive among most young women on campus. There was a lot of discomfort with what my physical body was doing, and it seemed to be everybody's business, which was interesting for me. We were very young. We were 22 years old when we got married, and we were expecting our first child while living at the Newman House with roughly 11,000 college students right out our front door surrounding our home. And so we were really like living in a fishbowl, kind of, in many ways, all eyes upon us all the time. And it was such a blessing for me to have the opportunity for conversations with young women, because what happened during that time at the Newman House is God spoke directly into my heart about what my unique call and my unique mission would be in this world. And I realized that somebody needs to tell young women the truth about their bodies. Somebody needs to be telling young women that their bodies are not the problem. The problem is a society that doesn't understand their bodies. Your breastfeeding, your fertility, your childbearing, they are not inconveniences. They are the most valuable things that you can offer to the future generations of humanity if you are called to physical motherhood. And leaning into that and being present for your children is absolutely crucial. So in those conversations with young women, it just became so clear to me that even the well-churched, even the well-catechized, we were running a Newman Center. We were running campus ministry. This is where the Catholic girls were coming for Mass every Sunday. They didn't know how their body worked. They had never been given the opportunity to learn natural fertility methods, and they didn't have an expectation that the young men would cooperate with them, which was heartbreaking. And so being a married couple on a college campus gave us a really unique and tremendous opportunity for my husband as well to talk with the young men and say, you are capable. You are capable of controlling your sexual urges, of understanding your partner's fertility and working with it. It was just a huge blessing for our marriage, honestly, to get to start out in this way and to be verbalizing these things and witnessing to them, because it held us accountable for the next almost 18 years. We've been married now almost for 18 years. And as we've welcomed each new child and as we've been open to our fertility, we've affirmed over and over again what our values are and why the church is so wise by giving us this very natural order of our body. Our body is good and it should be listened to and respected. Now, how that practically led me into founding a nonprofit was God's great sense of humor, I guess. But we left campus ministry as we had our second child, and I was so on fire because these young women had so much need. I could see the questions. I could just hear their concerns, and I just knew someone needs to tell them the truth. And I understood that for me, the greatest place of wounding had been in the doctor's office. It had been through healthcare providers that I had the most doubt instilled in my heart, the most fear about what my body was doing. And so I knew that I needed to go back into the healthcare field. And so after I graduated with my undergrad, I went back and did a master's in women's health, and I became a board-certified lactation consultant. And so I found that I was able, as a lactation consultant, to help women who are processing traumatic births, difficult pregnancies, fear about their inadequacy, fear about whether or not they could be a good mother, those first few days and weeks postpartum it is a sacred time. It is a special and a sacred time and incredibly vulnerable. And I have worked in the pro-life movement for much of my life, been involved with pregnancy centers and sidewalk advocacy and counseling, and I have found that in the confines and the security of an exam room or a consultation room with a woman as her trusted healthcare provider, that I have a much greater opportunity to speak the truth about how she was created to be, how God intended for her to live out her maternity on this world than I've ever seen anywhere else. I believe fully and strongly that healthcare is the vehicle that we can drive to create a full culture of life. And it starts with women's healthcare. It starts by giving women back the truth about their physical bodies. Because what I found was that my physical body taught me very deep spiritual truths about maternity. I'm not sure I would have ever understood how to be a spiritual mother until I understood how to be a physical mother. And that's just maybe me personally, and maybe it's that my faith life wasn't strong enough, I'm not sure. But I know that at 3 a.m., when my baby is crying and I have to get up and nurse and change and rock and soothe, that I am becoming a more selfless person, that I am becoming more and more the person God created me to be, and I needed the demands of children to make me holier. I don't know if there's any other moms here that have experienced that, but sometimes we laugh about, that we have 7 children. I'm like, I don't think we're going to stop until I finally reach that level of surrender and holiness that God desires for me, because each one is just so sanctifying for me. So within the midst of all this, I founded Guiding Star Project because I understood that healthcare is the place where women's hearts can be healed towards a culture of life. And so we've began founding basically women's healthcare facilities that focus on fertility, childbirth, and breastfeeding as our 3 core medical services, and then a 4th core tenet of family life. And that's acknowledging that every woman belongs to the family of humanity, the family of God, and sometimes that includes her children. So all of our centers insist upon having drop-in child watch available because every woman needs to know that her family unit, her children, her world, that they're welcome where she is welcome. We need to start creating a world where family and children are just a normal part of everyday life. I'm just going to make sure I hit any of these points. So advice, I guess, for any young woman who is transitioning into motherhood. I also bought the idea that as soon as you have children, you kind of have to exit in some ways from the workforce or academic life. And so I am a stay-at-home working mom. I do work full-time from home. And that's merely because I really strongly believe that we're meant to be with our children for the first few years of their life. Our bodies tell us deep spiritual truths. We lactate for a reason. Our babies want to nurse for a reason. And for me, that means having accessibility to my baby throughout the day and having my baby near me. And unfortunately, as Gloria, talked a little bit about, in general, the corporate world is not yet comfortable with that. And so it is absolutely crucial that we women who are called to work outside the home do speak up about the needs of our physical bodies. I sometimes like to imagine what the workforce would be like if it were truly female friendly. And I joke about, wouldn't it be wonderful if we had our monthly menstrual days? If it was so common that we understood women's bodies should act in a certain way, that there were mental health days each month. I mean, these things, we laugh about them because they seem so far-fetched, but they shouldn't be. It should not be that far-fetched that we could talk about what our body is doing. And so things like breastfeeding our babies and lactating and needing access to rooms like that is a crucial component of what every one of us needs to be talking about to create a culture of life, a culture that acknowledges female bodies are unique and different from men's. So if you're transitioning into motherhood, I just encourage you, please don't fear your body. Don't fear what it's doing. I breastfed all over on a college campus as modestly as I could, but I did it. And that right there was a message that said, my body is not a mistake, and I trust that the way God made my body in communication, in communion with this little person is exactly the motherhood that I am called to. So
Thank you so much, Leah.